this session is on finding exact trig functions from given information. So let's establish why we're going to approach this. Some people use the unit circle. I'm going to explain it using a right triangle. So if we have a right triangle, and we're talking about the angle x, then this would be the angle adjacent, this would be the opposite, and this would be the hypotenuse. I was taught to remember sine, cosine, and tangent by Oliver and Oscar have had apples. Corny, I know, but it works. But sine of x is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent is opposite over adjacent. Then cosecant is reciprocal of sine, so it's hypotenuse over opposite. Secant is hypotenuse over adjacent, and cotangent is adjacent over opposite. And then we'll also be using our Pythagorean theorem that in a right triangle, a squared plus b squared has to equal c squared. So if you have secant x is square root of 14, and you're told you're in quadrant 4, I recommend you always draw it and get yourself a visual. So this is my angle. And secant x, remember, is hypotenuse over adjacent. So if it's a square root of 14, it has to be square root of 14 over 1. So my hypotenuse is square root of 14, and my adjacent is 1. Now I'll have to calculate the opposite side. So if we use a squared plus b squared equals c squared, we have 1 plus b squared equals square root of 14 squared. So b squared is 14 minus 1, which is 13. And then b would be plus or minus square root of 13. Now this is where my fourth quadrant comes in. For it to be in this quadrant, I have to be minus square root of 13. So it has to be negative. Now I'm ready to write my 6 functions based on those values. Now cosine comes straight from secant, just the reciprocal. So cosine x will be 1 over the square root of 14. Now sine of x will be the opposite, negative square root of 13, over the hypotenuse, square root of 14. So we have negative square root of 13/14. Then the cosecant will be its reciprocal, so that's negative square root of 14/13. Tangent will be the opposite over adjacent, which is negative square root of 13 over 1, or just negative square root of 13. And then the cotangent will be its reciprocal, so negative 1 over square root of 13. Another one. Cotangent of x is negative 4/3, and you're in quadrant 2. Alright, so I'm in quadrant 2. And if I've got negative 4/3, then remember your cotangent of x is your adjacent over your opposite. So my adjacent will have to be the negative 3, since I'm in quadrant 2. No, negative 4. And then my opposite will be the 3. Now using my a squared plus b squared equals c squared, I can find the hypotenuse. So I have 9 plus 16 equals c squared. 9 plus 16 is 25 equals c squared, and c equal 5. So this one, or the hypotenuse, is 5. Alright, let's write all of them. You had cotangent, so tangent will be its reciprocal, negative 3/4. Sine of x will be the opposite over the hypotenuse, 3/5. The cosecant will be its reciprocal, 5/3. The cosine will be negative 4/5, the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and the secant will be the reciprocal, negative 5/4. Alright, one last one. And this one, rather than giving me one of the trig functions, it only tells me where my terminal side has a point. Alright, so this terminal side contains the point negative square root of 5. Sorry about that. Negative square root of 5, 2. Right, so there's my reference triangle. And now we need to do our calculating our third side. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And negative square root of 5 squared would be 5. B squared is 4 equals c squared. 9 equals c squared. So c equals 3. And the hypotenuse is never negative. It's the distance from the length of the radius. So it will be the positive 3. Now you're ready to write all 6 trig functions. So we'll start with sine as opposite over hypotenuse, which is 2/3. Cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, negative square root of 5/3. Tangent opposite over adjacent, so that's 2 over negative square root of 5. And then the reciprocals of each. So cosecant will be 3/2. Secant will be negative 3 over the square root of 5. And cotangent will be negative 5, square root of 5/2. I hope you find this helpful.